Okay, so now let's talk about switch statement. So let's see what is the syntax of switch. Let's take a new problem statement. So let's say that you have to write a program in which user gives an input, or for that matter there's an integer value from, let's say, 1 to 12, and based on the value of integer you have to print the month. So if it's 1, you have to print January. If you have to print if it's 2, you have to print Feb. Accordingly, you have to print the month depending upon the integer value. So if we go on to write else if in this case, it will be very long and it won't be very much readable. How do we use switch in this case is, let's say I have public static void main, okay, so let's say this is my main. What will I do? I'll take an integer, let's say int month. Let's say month is 5. Let's say we also have a string, month string. So based on the value of this month, I have to assign month string the value January, February accordingly. So now this is what we know till now. Let's talk about switch. So for switch, we have a keyword switch, and then we have a variable here. So here I am putting month. We will see what is the use case of putting month here. So we have the switch keyword, we have a variable, then we have a switch block. Now inside this we have several cases. So let's say we have a case 1, then we put colon, and for this case 1, what will I do? I will write month string equal to Jan. Let's say I write one more statement, sys out month string. Then we have a break. Then we have case 2. I'll tell you the use case. Month string equal Feb, sys out month string. Let's say I'm writing the cases from here. I'm writing the code here now. We have case 3, month string equal March, sys out month string. Similarly, let's say we have case 4, string equal to April, break, case 5, and then we have, let's say, month string equal to May, and then we have a default. Let's say month string equal undefined. Okay, so let's see the code. I had to write it here because of lack of space. So let's say we start how switch goes. Let's try to understand. We have a switch statement and we have a variable. Based on the value of these variable, one of the cases gets executed. So we have a switch, we have a variable, and then we write several cases. So here we have case 1. So inside this case 1, we have 3 statements. We have these 3 statements. Inside case 2, we have this 2 statement. For case 3, we have this 2 statement. So we are writing case. So this is case is the keyword. 1 this is something that keeps on changing. So here we are taking month which can have value from 1 to 12. So it will have value from case 1, case 2, case 3, case 4, case 5. So if it would have been something else, like if it would have been string, so let's say we could have taken it the other way, that based on the value of string, print that the month number. In that case we could have taken case January. So we could have written case January. So depending upon what is the data type of this particular variable, here the value changes. So here we are considering an integer. So this is case 1, and then we have case 2, we have case 3, case 4, case 5. Now let's see how the execution goes. So here what happens is that the value of month is checked. The value of month is checked. So 1 is not the value, 2 is not the value, 3 is not the value, 4 is not the value, 5 is the value. So now what happens, that whatever statement comes under case 5 gets executed. So here we have just one statement, month string equal to May. This statement gets executed. If there would have been one more statement, let's say sys out month string, then May would have got printed. So there are several things to note here. So as you can see here that we are using a break statement here. So we are using break. So what happens, why do we use break is, so in this case, let's say the value of month is 1. So if the value of month is 1, then this statement will get executed, this statement will get executed. The break does the task of breaking the flow of execution. As soon as the break is encountered, the execution comes out of switch statement. So if switch is there, and let's say this is the execution, so if there is some case which is executed and break is there, so the execution, or let's say the code flow, comes out of the switch statement, and whatever statement is here after switch gets executed. So that's why after each case we have to ensure that there is a break. So now you can see that I haven't put break here, I haven't added break here. So what happens if we don't add break in switch? So if we don't add break, what happens? Let's say the month value is 2, case 2 gets executed. So these two statements get executed. And since break is not there, the execution continues. So these two statement gets executed, these two statement gets executed, this gets executed, and when a break is encountered, only then the execution stops, and again the control comes out of this switch statement. So this is something, a trick thing, whenever you are you may get some mock test, or when you're writing switch statement, take care of this break statement. If you don't put break, the flow keeps on going. Then at last we have a default. So we generally have a default statement. So what is default statement? Let's say we are taking the input from user here, the value of input we are taking from the user, and the user put something like 13. So this is undefined. For handling such cases, we keep a default. So if the user gives 13, 14, 15 or 100, for these we are keeping a default value. So if none of these values are true, or none of these cases get executed, then only default gets executed, and whatever is in default gets printed. So we generally use default when we have to do something like that, undefined behavior, or we have to tell the user that the input that you printed is not right. So we generally use default. Default is something that is not important or must have, but it's good to have default in your code. Now one thing to note here about switch is that, as we saw that we had a switch and then we had a variable, and based on the value of this variable the cases get executed. Now for this variable, not all data types are allowed. What is allowed is character, bytes, integer, string, and enum. So these are the allowed data types for this particular variable, and based on this data type the cases are formed and executed. So this was something about switch. So just now we also saw else if ladder, if else if ladder, and we saw switch. Let's quickly discuss that what is the benefit of one over the other and where we can use this. The number one point is that if you have generally more than 5 cases, we prefer switch. Why? Because one thing clear about switch is that switch is more readable. Apart from that, as I said, for more than 5 cases, switch is faster, because what happens is that for switch statement, a lookup table, or you can say a hash table, is created for the cases, due to which the access time for all the cases becomes constant. Hence, switch is faster compared to if else if. Talking about some of the benefits of if else if over switch. In case of switch, you can just check that whether the number or the variable is equal to a particular thing or not. So in cases, we can just have a particular value here. We cannot have a range of values. So in case of if else if, we can use it for range of values or for boolean things. So like we were checking that if num is greater than 80 and less than 60. So for these kind of operations, when we have to check these kind of conditions, then we have if else if better than switch. Use of if else if better than switch. So these were some of the differences of if else if versus switch. So depending upon the use case that you have, you can choose between them. Now this was all about selection statements.